thank you so much for chatting with me today. So do you mind just starting off telling us a little bit about yourself and your role at the Collective Intelligence Project?
Yeah, it's so great to be in conversation with you. My name's Zarinah Agnew. I'm Research Director at the Collective Intelligence Project. We work on collectively intelligent ways to take public input and use that to influence the AI ecosystem.
Fantastic. And generally speaking, what would you say is like the mission and like goals of the business?
Yeah, we're a nonprofit R&D lab, and largely what we do is work with the global public or communities or civil society organizations and find ways to connect public to power, to centers of power in the AI ecosystem. So we also work with AI labs, national governments and countries to take public input, whether it's from the global public, as we're doing in global dialogues, or from certain sort of experts that are representing their communities or even grassroots communities, and use that information to influence AI models and regulations, safety regulations in ways that serve the public well.
Okay, amazing. And then you obviously mentioned the Global Dialogues project. Do you mind just bringing that to life for us a little bit? So kind of like the purpose and the origins of it. Yeah.
Yeah, great. Global Dialogues is a project that we launched at the end of last year, and then we publicly launched it at the AI Summit in Paris earlier this year with Audrey Tang. So Global Dialogues is an ongoing conversation between the global public and AI labs and centers of power. So we run these global dialogues every 2 months. We've been working with Prolific to reach the global public, which has been really wonderful. And we are partnering with Remesh AI, which is an incredible sort of human AI semi-deliberative dialogue platform for having ongoing conversations in digital form. And we started off asking the global public about things like their values. What's one thing that you value above all else? What's important to you in your community? What is one thing that you want to ask world leaders? And the first conversation we had was quite broad. And then each sort of conversation that we have with the global public informs the next. And we've been partnering with lots of interesting and wonderful organizations to design the questions, which has been really fun.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, so what kinds of questions have you been asking?
Okay, so we started off, our first conversation was very broad. It was, what matters to you? What is something that you stand for above all else? Really getting at the sort of like cultural variety across the world. The second cadence we did with Mistral, and we were specifically focusing on system prompts. So we were asking people, how do you want your AI to respond to you? What kind of tone do you want? Do you want creativity? Do you want accuracy or logical consistency? And that was really interesting. The third cadence was near-term scenarios. So we asked people to focus on near-term scenarios to try and get them a little bit outside of what's currently going on and ahead of the curve, to say things like, in the near-term future, AI may be able to help us with end-of-life care, and this might take some of the effort, some of the emotional burden off hospice workers. How would you feel about this future? And one of the lovely things about the platform that we're using, Remesh, is that you can obviously run basic things like polls and surveys and ranked choice voting, but you can also offer these open-ended responses where people can speak freely, and people can vote on the statements that they agree with. So one person might offer a really nuanced view that captures like, it would be wonderful to take this emotional burden off hospice workers, but I don't want AI to be making decisions about my end-of-life care. And then people from all over the world can agree or disagree, agree with that statement. And so you can end up with quite nuanced statements that have global majority consensus. So the near-term scenarios was very interesting. And my sort of learning is that if you ask people things like, do you think AI should be involved in end-of-life care? They will probably say no. But if you paint a scenario in which some of the sort of implications are laid out, positive and negative, and allow people to speak freely, they're able to offer very nuanced and interesting opinions. So that was our third conversation that went out. And then our fourth one is currently live. So our fourth conversation has really focused in, mostly because what we started to see was humans are forming intimate connections with their AIs. We are transitioning from AI as a tool to AI as a companion. And so we really focused in on that for GD4. So we haven't got the results yet because it's live and we're all on tenterhooks. But we asked a lot of questions like what are the factors that cause you to feel like AI is a companion rather than a tool? What kinds of emotional connections are you forming? What kinds of factors lead to you feeling like AI might be conscious or might have a conscious awareness of itself? So all sorts of spicy questions in the current conversation.
Nice. I mean, it's so interesting hearing you talk about it. And you specifically wanted a global sample for this project. Yeah, can you tell me a bit more about the kind of sample that you were looking for and why?
I mean, for us, AI is a transformative technology. It's changing our world at a pace that we can't even keep up with. And so the global majority have no say about what's happening in the AI ecosystem. And so we wanted to get a broad reach, and we wanted to do it. We wanted to be able to get this information fast. And so Prolific has allowed us to reach corners of the, I shouldn't say corners of the globe because it's round, parts of the globe that we couldn't have gotten access to, or if we wanted to, it would have just taken a lot longer and we would have had to go through partner organizations. And so working with Prolific has allowed us to really cast a wide net on these opinions so that we can really see, are people clustering according to country, or is it religion that's really the determining factor on how people relate to things, or is it age? Maybe it's people over the age of 50 versus people under the age of 20 that's determining a lot of these differences. And so yeah, working with Prolific has really allowed us to cast this wide net to ask those kinds of questions.
Nice. And did you look at other partners that could potentially provide this sample, or why did you end up choosing Prolific?
I mean, at CIP, we are exploring various aspects of collective intelligence, one of which is who is the collective. And so we are exploring alternative modes of getting public input. We're working in a parallel project to collect input from civil society orgs, right? So the hypothesis is perhaps civil society organizations who are situated in their community but also have more technical expertise are well positioned to give input into how frontier models are representing or failing to represent their communities in situ. But of course, we also want to work with the global public and meet them where they're at, just average normal people who may or may not be engaging with AI themselves. And so we're exploring a range of approaches to get input into these things.
Nice. Cool. And but in general, when you landed on Prolific's doorstep, were there any specific features or things that jumped out at you, which is why you ended up using us?
I mean, Prolific have fairly good representation across the globe, which is a very hard thing to do. Obviously for us, a major limitation is that these things are digital. And so we are not able to cross the digital divide, which is something that we are trying to address in some of our other projects. But, Prolific has a well populated database and is built by researchers to address these very kinds of problems. One thing I wasn't sure about so much actually is that for us, we don't really want repeated samples. We for each of our rounds, we ideally want to get different people for each of these conversations, and I guess that for many people who are using Prolific, they probably are less worried about that. And because there's quite good representation and numbers of people in the Prolific database, we felt like this was a good move for us.
Yeah, definitely. Um, nice. And you mentioned your setup a little bit at the beginning. So you're using Remesh, you're using Prolific. Could you just give a little bit of flavor of how it works in a practical sense? So
Mm-hmm.
from creating the questions to getting it live.
Yeah, so my role at CAP on this project at least is designing the questions, and one of our main theories of impact is that you can't just take public input and present it at the halls of power. That's not good enough. That's an approach that often leads to democracy washing. Actually, what you need to do is take public input and turn it into something that is that interfaces meaningfully with AI labs, policymakers, or countries. And so for this project, we are working on turning our global public input into evaluations, and our hope is that this is a meaningful way to interface with AI labs and the general AI ecosystem in a way to sort of pull models closer to more representative, like globally representative and culturally diverse representation. And that is very much in prototype form, but that's what we're working on.
Okay, nice. And and I was just wondering about like the impact of this project. So how is it going? Have you taken these results anywhere yet?
Yeah, it's been wonderful. So as I mentioned, we launched the AI Summit in Paris. So we had our first set of data there. We have reached, I think, well over 3,000 people globally. I think one of the things that has been very reassuring and wonderful to me is that people all over the world, rural, urban, in all sorts of countries, are able to offer really nuanced insights about the things that they care about as it pertains to AI. And I think it's really important that we don't forget, especially for those of us in Silicon Valley that sort of all live in a cultural bubble, that it's really important that we don't forget that people are able to engage. They have meaningful things to say. And it's worth listening to what they want, not just what they are afraid of, but what they're aspiring for. And people are able to dream impressive dreams. And so we have a public-facing website, which is globaldialogues.ai, and we put each of our data sets up there every time we have a round. We just have launched the Global Dialogues Challenge. So all of the data is open source, and we have a prize for which, our hope really is to engage the public in meaningful ways to represent this data or make sense of this data or build technical outputs from this data. And so the Global Dialogues Challenge is live. Anyone can join, register, and download the data, do something interesting with it, write something beautiful, create a graphic comic, build tools with it, build visualizations. And so we are expecting that the kind of outputs from the challenge will provide a ton of different interesting, beautiful, and meaningful outputs. So that's the sort of public-facing output from Global Dialogues. And then internally, as I mentioned, we are working to turn this data into meaningful evaluations that we can start shifting the sort of future trajectory of AI models towards better outcomes for everybody.
Nice. Oh, that sounds great. I'll definitely be going and having a look at the challenge after this.
It's a prize.
Yeah. I was just wondering if you have any information specifically on like the setup itself. So like how if someone wanted to set up a project that was similar at home,
Mhm.
how might they use Prolific and Remesh to do
Got it.
that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, heads up, it's quite expensive. So, but I'll talk you through it anyway. Yeah, so largely what I do is I think about what are the kinds of questions we need to ask. I have various, like I look at the research out there and I try and keep my finger on the pulse of what's happening from the previous conversation. So question design. And Remesh has a bunch of different kinds of questions that you can ask. Their platform has a lot of great documentation. So if anyone wants to use it, they've got very good documentation on the kinds of questions that range from polls to ranked choice to asking people their opinions that are free open text, or asking people their experiences, which are open text that becomes categorized. So our conversations run at about 30 minutes long. I do think, when you're doing classic survey design, it is like ideal to keep it quite short. But because these feel a lot more like conversations than surveys, I think you can push that a little bit. So question design, I try and make sure, because it is a conversation rather than just a series of polls, let's say, that there's a narrative arc, especially because when we're asking the global public about AI, there's a bit of context setting. And so there's a sort of arc to the conversation, which gives people the context by which they can answer the next set of questions. So that might be like, did you know that this thing happened in 2022? These are some of the implications. What do you think about that? These are the kinds of ways that you can structure these conversations. So once the questions are all designed, then I put all of those into the Remesh.ai platform. I tend to run a US pilot, or a pilot in one country that just has 20 participants, just so that I can check the sort of the amount of time it takes people to run through the conversation, that there aren't glaring errors or some terrible mistake that I've made. We have a base set of demographics that we ask people. We also have a bunch of indicators, which are things that we're asking every round because we want to track them over time. Most of our indicator questions relate to AI usage and trust in AI, trust in institutions, trust in government, because we want to see how that is shifting over this year as AI enters more and more into the daily fabric of life, and also as agents start to appear, and as governments start to deploy AI also. So we have our demographics, we have our indicators, and then we have our question conversation. Run a pilot, check that it all works. So once I have Remesh set up, then I go to Prolific and I set up my Prolific side of things, which asks me, this is where I have like sort of informed consent and tell people what's going to happen with the data and remind people that it's anonymized. Choose the country that you want to pilot in, and then you can link your Remesh conversation to Prolific, and vice versa. So at the end of the Remesh conversation, people get redirected back to Prolific to get paid. Make sure that they're all synced, and I run a little pilot. It happens, the pilots are extremely quick. I run 20 subjects, and it's, with using Prolific is done in a few hours, which is just extraordinary tool for research. It's just really, really incredible. Have a quick look at the data, and then I do the whole same thing for the global pilot. On our end, sort of technically, I can't run the Prolific side of things for the global public on my own, and so I have a very lovely collaborator at Prolific who puts that all out into the public for us. And then the conversation goes live, and you start to see people from different parts of the world filtering in. There are ways on Remesh to set country quotas. And then Prolific obviously have their strata for representation also. And so these are sort of two levers that you can tweak depending on what you care about. Maybe you care more about country representation than you do about regional representation, or some other factor. And that's something that you can sort of custom work on.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
I should say one other thing.
Yeah.
Obviously translation is a big piece, right?
Yeah.
When you're trying to get to a global population, making sure that your questions are translated. So Remesh has auto-translate to many languages. We translate to 7 languages. We do, because these questions are quite sort of complex and we're touching on very nuanced things, we actually send our translations out to human checkers who go through all of the translations. So we do the auto translate, and then we send all of those to humans and ask them if there's any sort of cultural modifications. And then we sort of upload those back into Remesh. So for us, translation is nuance and regional appropriate language is very important for us. And so we sort of go a bit over and above on that front.
Well, nice. That's really good to think about. Yes, because you would. It's quite easy to forget actually sometimes when you just seem to have a global crowd at your fingertips, and then actually there's a lot of stuff you need to think about.
Yeah.
But that's awesome. And what would you say were your favorite things about working? But favorite thing about working with Remesh and favorite thing about working with Prolific?
I mean, honestly, both platforms are incredible and we're extremely lucky to be partnering with both. But actually, it's the combination of the two that has felt really magical. And for a scientist like me to be able to reach these kinds of populations with these kinds of conversations is extraordinary. It would obviously be wonderful to be able to send surveys out to a global public. But so what Remesh does is allow these kind of beautiful conversations and also sort of AI enhanced sort of early analysis of the data. And what Prolific does is it provides a listening ear to the world, and the two of those things together is extremely powerful.
Nice. Thank you so much.